3, 2, 1. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to PE with Joe. Now, we've got extract 22 of Roald Dahl's Dunny, the Champion of the World. Goodbye, Mr. Hazel. The big shiny silver Rolls Royce had braked suddenly and come to a stop right alongside the filling station. Behind the wheel I could see the enormous, pink, beery face of Mr. Victor Hazel staring at the pheasants. I could see the mouth hanging open, the eyes bulging out of his head like toadstools, and the skin of his face turning from pink to bright scarlet. The car door opened and out he came, resplendent in fawn-coloured riding breeches and high polished boots. There was a yellow silk scarf with red dots on it round his neck, and he had the sort of bowler hat on his head that you would see at some kind of shooting party. His great party was about to begin, and he was on his way to greet his guests. He left the door of the Rolls open and came at us like a charging bull. My father, Doc Spencer, and I stood close together in a little group, waiting for him. He started shouting at us the moment he got out of the car, and he went on shouting for a long time after that. I'm sure you'd like to know what he said, but I cannot possibly repeat it here. The language he used was so foul, so filthy that it scorched my ear holes. Words came out of his mouth I hoped to never hear again, and certainly had never heard before. Little flecks of white foam began forming around his lips and running down his chin onto his yellow silk scarf. I glanced at my father. He was standing very still and very calm, waiting for the shouting to finish. The colour was back in his cheeks now, and I could see the tiny twinkling wrinkles of a smile round the corner of his eyes. Doc Spencer stood beside him, and he also was very calm. He was looking at Mr. Hazel rather as one would look at a slug on a leaf of lettuce in a salad. I myself did not feel quite so calm. But they're not your pheasants, my father said at last. They're mine.
Don't lie to me, man!
Yelled Mr. Hazel.
I'm the only person round here who has any pheasants.
They're on my land, my father said quietly. They flew onto my land, and so long as they stay on my land, they belong to me. Don't you know the rules, you bloated old blue-faced baboon? Doc Spencer started to giggle. Mr. Hazel's skin turned from scarlet to purple. His eyes and his cheeks were bulging so much with rage that it looked as though someone was blowing up his face with a pump. He glared at my father. Then he glared at the dopey pheasants swarming all over the filling station.
What's the matter with them?
He shouted, what have you done to them? At this point, pedalling grandly towards us on his black bicycle, came the arm of the law in the shape of Sergeant Enoch Samways, resplendent in his blue uniform and shiny silver buttons. It was always a mystery to me how Sergeant Samways could sniff out trouble wherever it was. Let there be a few boys fighting on the pavement, or two motorists arguing over dented bumper, and you could bet your life that the village policeman would be there within minutes. We all saw him coming now, and a little hush fell upon the entire company. I imagine the same sort of thing happens when a king or a president enters a room full of chattering people. They all stop talking and stand very still as a mark of respect for a powerful and important person. Sergeant Samways dismounted from his bicycle and threaded his way carefully through the mass of pheasants squatting on the ground. The face behind the big black moustache showed no surprise, no anger, no emotion of any kind. It was calm and neutral, as the face of the law always should be. For a full half-minute he allowed his eyes to travel slowly round the filling station, gazing at the mass of pheasants squatting all over the place. The rest of us, including even Mr. Hazel, waited in silence for judgment to be pronounced. Well, 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 said Sergeant Samways at last, puffing out his chest and addressing nobody in particular. What, may I ask, is happening round here? Sergeant Samways had a funny habit of sometimes putting the letter H in front of words that shouldn't have an H there at all, and as though to balance things out, he would take away the letter H from all the words that should have begun with the letter.
I tell you what's happening round here,
shouted Mr. Hazel, advancing on the policeman.
These are my pheasants, and this rogue,
he said, pointing at my father,
has enticed them out of my woods onto his filthy little filling station.
Enticed, said Sergeant Samways, looking first at Mr. Hazel and then at us. Entice them, you say?
Of course he enticed them.
Well now, said the sergeant, propping his bicycle carefully against one of our pumps. This is a most interesting accusation. Very interesting indeed, because I ain't never heard of nobody enticing a pheasant across 6 miles of fields and open countryside. How do you think this enticing was performed, Mr. Hazel, if I may ask?
Don't ask me how he did it, because I don't know,
shouted Mr. Hazel.
But he's done it all right. Proof is all around you. All my finest birds are sitting here in this dirty little filling station when they ought to be up in my own woods getting ready to be shot.
The words poured out of Mr. Hazel's mouth like hot lava from a volcano erupting. Am I correct, said Sergeant Samways? Am I absolutely accurate in thinking that today is the day of your great shooting party, Mr. Hazel?
That's the whole point,
cried Mr. Hazel, stabbing his forefinger into the sergeant's chest as though he were punching a typewriter or an adding machine.
And if I don't get these birds back on my land pretty sharpish, some very important people are going to be extremely angry this morning. And one of my guests, I'll have you know, Sergeant, is none other than your own boss, the Chief Constable of the county. So you better do something about it fast, hadn't you? Unless you want to lose those sergeant stripes of yours.
Sergeant Samways did not like people poking their fingers at his chest, least of all Mr. Hazel, and he showed it by twitching his upper lip so violently that his moustache came alive and jumped about like a small bristly animal. Now, just 1 minute, he said to Mr. Hazel. Just 1 minute, please. Am I to understand that you are accusing this gentleman here of committing this act?
Of course I am,
cried Mr. Hazel.
I know he did it.
And do you have any evidence to support this accusation?
The evidence is all around you, shouted Mr. Hazel. Are you blind or something?
Now my father stepped forward. He took one small pace to the front and fixed Mr. Hazel with his marvellously bright, twinkly eyes. Surely you know how these pheasants came here, he said softly.
Surely I do not know how they came here,
snapped Mr. Hazel. Then I shall tell you, my father said, because it's quite simple, really. They all knew they were going to be shot today if they stayed in your wood, so they flew in here to wait until the shooting was over.
Rubbish!
Yelled Mr. Hazel. Not rubbish at all, my father said. Extremely intelligent birds, pheasants. Isn't that so, Doctor? They have a most tremendous brain power, Doc Spencer said, and they know exactly what's going on. It would undoubtedly be a great honour, my father said, to be shot by the Chief Constable of the county, an even greater one to be eaten afterwards by Lord Thistlethwaite, but I do not think a pheasant would see it that way.
You are scoundrels, both of you,
shouted Mr. Hazel.
You're rapscallions of the worst kind.
Now then, said Ham Samways. Insults ain't going to get us nowhere. They only aggravate things. Therefore, gentlemen, I have a suggestion to put before you. I suggest that we all of us make a big effort to drive these birds back over the road onto Mr. Hazel's land. How does that strike you, Mr. Hazel?
Well, be a step in the right direction,
Mr. Hazel said.
Get on with it, then.
How about you, Willem? The sergeant said to my father. Are you agreeable to this idea? I think it's a splendid idea, my father said, giving Sergeant Samways one of his funny looks. I'll be glad to help. And so will Danny.